We're on our first, what we would call building block of the seminar, and that is on cholesterol. Cholesterol, many people think of cholesterol as something that they don't want. Who's ever thought like that? Yeah. Most people, oh man, you got cholesterol? Oh, that's terrible. But cholesterol is used in the body for way over 100 different functions. Cholesterol actually is used. If we didn't have cholesterol, none of us would be here because it's used for reproduction. There's so many things. It's what makes vitamin D. Cholesterol actually converts to vitamin D. So we do need cholesterol. It's just we don't need too much.
That's correct. Basically, cholesterol is a wax-like substance that people have found it around 1900, turn of the century of the 1900s, and they were trying to figure out. It was a great mystery, but as they were doing more research, they found that all the animals had them, particularly in the liver. And they also realized that plants have very similar chemical called phytosterol. So there's a very similar product in plants as well as human, but human is unique because this cholesterol product, this molecule, has many, many functions. So predominantly, when you look at the cholesterol, you really need it for the cell wall. So we all have cells in our body. Every single one of them needs cholesterol in there. So it is vital to our systems to have the cholesterol. Also, there's many different functions, just as David said. There's actually more than 200 functions that you can find, particularly when it's relating to our sexual hormones. It's relevant to the vitamin D production. Again, it's a building and maintaining the cell wall. One of the critical functions that we'll see as we continue our discussion is that it is necessary for bioproduction in our liver. And cholesterol turns into cortisol, which helps us to deal with stress. So when our body is stressed, you're going to have elevation of cholesterol as well. So, cholesterol is a very, very important function. So to say, is cholesterol villain or is it a bad thing or a good thing? There's no such a thing. We all need the cholesterol. Okay? So where is cholesterol made?
Cholesterol is made in the liver. So when the body is needing, for example, if you're stressed a lot, the body tells the liver to start producing more cholesterol. So you've heard, hey, you need to reduce your stress levels to reduce your cholesterol. And that's one of the reasons, because the body produces its cholesterol. All animals, like Sam said, produce cholesterol. So what do we need cholesterol for? There's a couple rules which we just saw. Anything that has a face, a mother, anything that is
anything that has a liver, face, and a mother will have a cholesterol. Yeah. So that's a rule of thumb you should always remember when we're talking about diet. If the food that we're eating has a face or a mother or a liver, that food's going to contain cholesterol. So for people who have elevated cholesterol levels, you need to really avoid anything that has a cholesterol in there. Now, cholesterol has a very important functions in the diet because basically, like I said, cholesterol is part of the wall, our daily function, but it has a very crucial role in digestion of fat. So basically, anytime you're eating fatty meals, your body has to release the bile salts the bile salts go into your intestine, and it emulsifies the fat so that it can be absorbed to the body. And as it's absorbed to the body, then it gets transported to the liver and to the rest of the body. So it has a critical function in absorption and metabolism of fat. Okay? So as you can look at this slide, there's basically two common transport of cholesterol. One is HDL, the other one is LDL, and then also there's a chemical called VLDL, and these are really, let me go to the next slide so you can see. LDL stands for low density lipoprotein, and its function is to deliver the cholesterol from the liver to the peripheral tissue. So it's like making a deposit into your body. But HDL, what it does is the high density lipoprotein brings back the cholesterol from the peripheral tissues back into the liver so that it can excrete it out into the body, into the bowel so that it can excrete it out of the body. So it's like making a withdrawal.
So, which one is good for you? I mean, which one would be good to have more of? Does anyone know? HDL or LDL? HDL.
Yeah, absolutely. You need the HDL. But you have to also remember that, triglyceride, which is really another word for fatty, food, fatty cells, okay? And so basically triglycerides carries the fats or the lipids from the food that you eat to the peripheral tissue as well through this system called VLDL, very low density lipoprotein, okay? And we all need that. Because, as you know, a lot of people consider, fatty food to be, bad thing, but we also know that we do need to eat some fat. So that's why God created the system, but too much of it is a problem. So, when you look at the value of the cholesterol, what would be a good number? What do you think? Well, what would be a good total number that we need to look at? Now, I wrote here as 160, lower than 160 is good, but in reality, the true ideal number is less than 150. And you know what? That's an incredible number. Most people that I test for cholesterol levels, they don't have that number. Most people have very high levels. And it's very, very unfortunate.
They found, the American Heart Association, they found that in the Framingham study, which was done in Framingham, Connecticut, over about a 20-year period, they studied almost 20,000 individuals. They followed them. And anyone that had a cholesterol of 150 or below never had a stroke or a heart attack. So then, doesn't it make sense that that's what our aim would be? 150 or below, right? Doesn't that make sense? So, coming out of that study, you see that
basically, when you have cholesterol less than 150, you're going to be reversing the deposit of the cholesterol into the blood cells. But if you have a higher than 150, so anything higher than 150, 160, you're going to have cholesterol depositing into the arteries. Anything less than 150, you're going to have clearing up of the deposits in the arteries. And unfortunately, what we're finding is that, even children, because I'm a pediatrician, I see children all the time, even though they're, we're finding in elementary kids have already elevated cholesterol level. It's amazing. I mean, I remember doing a blood test on a 3-year-old who had cholesterol level above 200. And, we tried everything. It was a very hard process of trying to lower that. But ultimately, Mom really stuck with me, and she worked on changing the diet, and we were able to control the cholesterol level to less than 160. Now, he's always going to be at risk. So his eating pattern has changed completely. But unless we do that, we're going to see progression of atherosclerosis, and we're going to see that child probably in the early 30s or late, early 40s, is destined to have a heart attack unless we change the diet. So that's why total cholesterol is a very, very important number for us to remember. But you also have to see about, HDL and LDL. Obviously, for men, we want to have HDL above 70. For female, above 50 is good. Um, and LDL, we want to have it less than 130, but optimally, we need to have it less than 90. So try to remember these numbers because as you look at your, lab results from the doctor's office, it's not going to mean anything unless you understand these numbers. So the most important critical thing to understand is that HDL helps us to get rid of the cholesterol. LDL helps to store up more cholesterol. So that's why we need to try to have less of LDL and more of HDL.
Yes, HDL, if you can remember easily, H for health. So that's the good one. It's confusing sometimes. And to increase HDL, one of the ways is by exercise. Exercise is something that will increase your HDL levels. Obviously, if you have high cholesterol, exercise is going to help you lower your cholesterol, but it is also going to help you get the correct balance. So,
and what they found was that if the American Heart Association recommend about 30 minutes of exercise, but the study really showed that we really need to do more of a brisk type of walking type of exercise for more than an hour to really make a huge impact on our cholesterol. So about an hour a day of walking will be ideal.
So an hour, we can walk 3.5 miles in an hour? Most people can walk about 3.5 miles an hour if after they've worked up to that. Some people might not be able to walk that fast, but it's not so much how far you walk, but walking as brisk as you can. It'll get faster and faster. I can walk a little over 4 miles an hour steady, no problem. My kids, they can keep up with me. But, when you're going up a hill, obviously it's going to be a little slower. So walking is something that is very good for keeping many other things under control also.
Well, we touched upon this, but I thought this was a very interesting cartoon where it says, "Don't go close to my dad. I think his cholesterol is above 290." To tell you the story, I had high cholesterol level. I think my cholesterol level when I turned about 30, that was the time when I really started checking, and my cholesterol level was just above 200. And so my doctor recommended that maybe I should consider taking the medication. Well, understanding about something about vegetarianism, I said, you know what, let me just try the diet. So I sort of turned vegetarian diet, and I was trying hard. So I did it for about, 3 to 6 months, and then I retested myself, and guess what? My cholesterol went higher. So, I ended up taking medications for cholesterol. But through David understanding certain principles, I was able to finally lower that, and we'll talk about that later. But when you have high level of cholesterol, as you can see in the slides, you'll see that your arteries begin to plug up. So, when you have a normal artery, those are like the baby arteries. They're very flexible. They're mobile. But as you begin to have elevated cholesterol level, you're going to see fatty streaks inside that. And we're beginning to see a lot of that in the children. And they're even progressing into this cholesterol plaque by the teenage years. Just imagine what's going to happen to them when they get older.
So, Sam, the normal artery, is it hard or elasticy?
It's meant to be very elasticy, but as the cholesterol builds up, the arteries will become more rigid, and it'll be very hard in their diameter, so it will not be as flexible. So that makes the heart work harder in pushing the blood through the hard tubes. This is why as you begin to build a lot of cholesterol, you're going to develop hypertension, because your body has to create a lot of pressure to push all the blood through your hardened arteries.
That narrowed artery is very small. So this artery, whoever had that artery or has that like that, what would that affect other than just having high cholesterol? Is that why they have hypertension?
Absolutely. obviously, when we have elevated cholesterol level, we're going to have all these problems. I mean, we've talked about some of these things yesterday. I mean, when you have high cholesterol levels, you're going to have heart attacks. You're going to also develop strokes. Those are the two top, or one of the three top killers. Obviously, diabetes plays a big factor. But also obesity and hypercholesterolemia also is involved with cancer as well. So if you look at it, the top 5 or 6 killers in America is really related to cholesterol in our diet. So, I really wanted to talk a little bit briefly about what is considered, optimal diet. I mean, what was the original diet that God designed for us to be eating? Well,
here in man's original diet at creation, Genesis 1:29, and God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be meat."
So man's original diet was meant to be seeds and fruits. That's what God told us to be eating. Now, what is seeds? Seeds are really, in essence, grains, beans, and nuts, right? All those things that when you plant them into the ground, they turn into seed. They turn into another plant. So therefore, grains and beans and nuts are all necessary in our diet, and on top of that, fruits. So anything that surrounds a seed, that's considered fruit. So those are the things that was the original diet that God gave to Adam and Eve. However,
after sin, what was the diet? Genesis 3:18, Adam and Eve sinned, and then thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field.
Now this herb really is not like the way we think of herbs, but it meant the vegetables. And so when Adam and Eve fell and they were now forbidden to access the tree of life, then God said, you're missing something in your diet. Therefore, you must eat some vegetables. So as much as kids would hate to eat vegetables, it is God's really, for our benefit, instructed us to be eating more vegetables. Does that make sense? So if you look at it, man's original diet really constitutes grains, beans, nuts, and vegetables. That was the original diet. However,
but can you get protein out of that?
Oh, there's tons of proteins in beans. So whenever I talk to my patients, I always tell them, grains are your main carbohydrates, beans are your main proteins, nuts are your essential fats, fruits, lots of vitamins, vegetables, I tell them that's a lot of minerals in there. So obviously I'm not talking about enzymes and things. Enzymes are in the fruits and vegetables as well, but we need to be eating these food which are really live. These are not dead food. These are live food. Remember, our diet should constitute more than just carbohydrates and proteins and fats. But when we look at these food, we realize that they have this electric charges in them. And these electric charges sort of are like the small batteries that help us to charge our body. So when we look at these foods, we need to make sure that we're eating live food. And that's why God instructed us to be eating this kind of food.
Now, after the flood, there was something that happened, and flesh was introduced back into the diet. Those that perished in the flood, they were already eating that, but God had not given them permission. So, in Leviticus, there is a certain way that it was given for them to eat. And who was the longest living man in the Bible? Methuselah. How many years? 969. If you look, you can read the Bible and you can mark out, from they begat and the son and all of this, you can figure out how long all of the the patriarchs' lives were. And it goes fine until it gets to Noah. Noah lived, 650?
No, 900.
Oh, 900.
900 over 930 years.
And then what happens? After the flood, all of a sudden it was cut in third. So the meat, the flesh, actually started taking its toll. God said that they had too long to live, and all of their thoughts were continually sinful. So when this talks about God's warning, ye shall eat no manner of fat of ox or of the sheep or of the goat, but ye shall in no wise eat of it. So what is that telling us? That he gave permission to eat of it, but what is he saying? Don't eat any of the fat. Okay, so there's one principle that he's giving.
But, God gave this instruction because even though he didn't explain it, now in our science we understand what's going on. But when we consume fat, we're going to be having lots of problems, particularly in our cholesterol, hypercholesterolemia and lipidemia and all this strokes and heart attacks. So he gave specific warning not to eat them, but God also gave another warning, which was in Genesis 9:3-5.
Every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green herb have I given you all things.
Now this was after the flood. Now when I read this, I thought God was giving permission for us to be eating any animals that was living in the earth. But that's not what he's saying. He's saying any that's living plants, right? Like the herbs that he gave us. Those are the food for us.
But flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat.
So God said, don't eat the fat and don't eat the blood. Why? Because, and surely your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it. So basically what he's saying is that every time you kill an animal to eat their flesh, God's going to shorten your life. This is why if you look at the lifespan of the people, before the flood, they were all living not more than 900 years. Not quite 1,000 years, but all less than 1,000 years. But yet, after the flood, as the flesh was introduced to the diet, they began to die at 700, 500. By Abraham's time, it was 300. And then even after that, now we can't even go beyond 100. So people say we're living longer, but in reality, we're living shorter. Why? Because of this diet of eating too much meat.
Now, if you read through the Bible, was there any place that after the flood, is there a place that tells us that there will be a time where we shouldn't eat meat or flesh later on? If you go to Hosea and I think Jeremiah, there's a place that talks about in the last days that the animals will become sickly because of the sins. Do we see that in animals now? We see all kinds of disease in the animals. Birds dropping out of the air. I mean, there's you just look at the news. Mad cow disease, all these different diseases. So there is a time, and I believe that time is now, that we should be putting away those things so that we can live to God's glory.
So, obviously, just like I said in my story, that I turned vegetarian, but just because you're a vegetarian does not mean you're eating healthy. Because in reality, you could be a vegetarian drinking soda and eating, French fries, right? So, being a vegetarian doesn't mean that you're going to be healthy. That just like I was, I was probably eating flesh food maybe once or twice a month. But yet my cholesterol level didn't drop. Even though I cut down significantly, my cholesterol level went higher.
Have you ever heard of someone, they were living so healthy, they were so careful with everything, but they still had high cholesterol or they had some other issue? It's there's so many different principles, you have to bring them all together. Because missing one principle can bring on high cholesterol.
Yeah, in fact, when we look at the modern studies, we're seeing that the death rate from heart attacks or or strokes or whatnot is very similar between vegetarians and flesh eaters. There's not that much difference. Now, does that mean it's okay to eat meat? No, no, no. That's not what I'm saying. When we turn to vegetarian diet, there are certain principles that you need to consider in mind, because you can be unbalanced in the good diet, as you'll see here. So, as we turn to the vegetarian diet and a more appropriate diet, it is very, very important that you understand the full story. Otherwise, you can miss the boat. Okay. Now, we also need to remember that there's other causes that elevates our cholesterol, particularly drugs, because so many of us are diseased in our lives that we're taking multiple medications. So medications such as prednisone, high blood pressure medications such as beta blockers or diuretics, and birth control pills, all those things tend to elevate our cholesterol level. And just like I said, the 3-year-old boy that had elevated cholesterol, that's familial. The child's family has tendency for high cholesterol levels, and the father had elevated cholesterol level. So the child at age 2 and 3 had elevated cholesterol level.
Hereditary tendency to have high cholesterol. Do you think that is reversible? Do you think you can bring that under control? Does anyone? Just because doctors or the medical society said you have this and it's hereditary, it runs in your family, does that mean that there's no choice? You will have to take your medication and be just happy with that? Or can you do something to reverse that? You can reverse it. I had a gentleman, he had been trying for a couple years to reverse it through diet. And it didn't affect it. Even the medication had a hard time changing it. He had gone vegan, which vegan, it has some other connotations, but he went off of dairy also, and I gave him the principles. He didn't follow them for a while, he kept them all written down and tucked away. And then one time, he decided that he was going to go gung-ho and just do it. In 2.5 weeks, he was normal, got full, clean blood test. He was so excited. He was just, he was an evangelist, so he was just keeping on talking for a good 30 minutes, and I was like, but it wasn't because of something I knew that it was all within me. It wasn't. It was the principles that we share. They're available to everyone, but it's piecing them all together.
Yeah, there's a lecture that's designed at the end of this series about plan, and so it is so critical for us to understand the complete picture, because everybody has pieces of the knowledge of the information, but we need to put it together so that we can see great success. Just like I was able to get off the cholesterol medication when I started following the principle, the plan.
Now, spiritual issues. In the Bible, do you know of a time in the Bible where someone had a disease that was not due to something they ate, or it was hereditary, but it was stricken to them because of something they did, breaking a spiritual law? I think of one very quickly, Miriam, when she had leprosy. She was stricken with leprosy when she talked against God's servant Moses, her brother. You remember that? Is there any medication that would have fixed her?
No.
No. That is one case where medication wouldn't affect. We sat down with individuals that the medication didn't fix, and when they went on the program, the plan, after a couple weeks, there should be some major changes. With cholesterol, it's about the 15th day is when you start seeing changes. We'll get into that a little bit later, why it's after the 14th day. And later, when we sat down with her again, we found out that there was a spiritual issue When she went and took care of that spiritual issue a couple days later, suddenly her cholesterol didn't go down the way it normally does when you start, but it went to where it would have been if she had not had that spiritual issue all along. So it just dropped. Totally fine.
Yeah, it really is amazing how we are not just, biological things put together, but we are a spiritual being. And when you have something that's, psychologically or spiritually that's bothering you, or that's you're breaking the law of the spiritual law, then sometimes the physical ailment does not relieve itself. You need to this is why God says, go and make it right with your brother before you come and ask for forgiveness, right? It is very, very important that we make it right with God as well as our fellow brother and sister. When we do that, then there can be true healing in all of us. Now, when we look at lowering the cholesterol, we talked about this briefly yesterday. Obviously, a lot of us take medication, but we found out yesterday that medication does very little in reducing the risk of heart attacks. The fact that you're going to die from heart attack. When you look through the data, you realize that, once you start the medication, 5 years later, the chance of you dying from heart attack is about the same, even though you're on medication. So why do we even bother taking medication? However, if we change the diet, there's going to be significant improvement. And if you stick to that diet from then on, then there's almost 99% chance that you're not going to die from heart attack or any other coronary artery disease. What a miraculous change just based upon diet, not so much on medication. So, how do we improve? I think we sort of need to take it to this analogy that when you see a problem, you're going to have to look at it multiple factors. When you see a sink that's overflowing and it's all over the floor, what do? Do you mop off the water first? Is that what we do?
Or do you turn off the water, or do you unplug the sink? What do you do first? Grab a mop? What do you think? Turn off the water.
We got to first turn off the water. And then if there's anything that's blocking the sink, you got to unplug the sink so that the water can drain. And then any other messes that's out there, we can, clean it up. So that's how it's involved in helping your cholesterol. Remember, there are many factors that you need to think about. So how do we improve our cholesterol?
Well, if the water is overflowing to your kitchen sink, first we're going to turn off the faucet. Unplug the sink, unplug the drain, and mop up the water. So, to turn off the faucet, here's a list. Eliminate all flesh and its byproducts from your diet. So why are we eliminating flesh? Because there's two different things in it. There's fat, and there's cholesterol. Remember, anything that has a face, a mother, or a liver has cholesterol. So you've essentially turned off the faucet, right? If you have begun to turn off the faucet when you eliminate flesh. Now, what's interesting is those who do not believe the Bible. Now science is finding out that plant-based, going back to the diet, given the original diet, is best. So the principles in the Bible are correct. And you wonder, if you don't believe in the Bible, and yet it's being proven again and again, why not start believing? Why not start studying and asking, give me truth? Am I just so blinded that I cannot see the truth? Am I blinded that I cannot see the Bible telling me these things? Or I'm rejecting them? So,
obviously the Bible says, don't eat the fat and don't eat the flesh animal because your lifespan will be shortened. I think that's the truth. So therefore, when you eliminate that, you're going to do a great service to your body in getting rid of the cholesterol in your system. Obviously, fried food is a secondary factor, and I think that was one of my culprits. When I became a vegetarian, I was still eating a lot of fried food. And when I did that, my cholesterol level didn't go down, it went higher.
So, if I eat a fried meal, Say I get some French fries and I get some
Fried chicken.
whatever fried. That extra fat in my body, we just studied, where is fat emulsified in the body? It wasn't in the stomach. Well,
It's after the stomach. So
it's after the stomach.
Small bowel.
Intestines. Okay? So when I eat I have an excessive fat meal, the body all of a sudden sees this food coming in and what is it, tasters? I don't know how it knows, but it knows that it needs to produce more cholesterol to produce the bile salts that emulsify the fat. So the liver goes into an elevated production of cholesterol to produce the bile salts that emulsify that extra fat. But how long does it stay in that production?
And this was a shocker to me. It stays up in production for 2 weeks. So this is why I was failing, because as I was, eating vegetarian diet, but, I would say to myself, I did really good. I didn't eat, anything bad for a couple of weeks. So then, family's here and you go out and eat and you say, oh, a little bit of fish here or a little bit of fried food there. And I would sort of cheat every couple of weeks. So if you cheat twice a month, you're good for the rest of the time. But if you cheat twice a month, every couple of weeks you eat fatty meal, then you know what? Your cholesterol level will never drop. And that's what happened to me. This is such an important factor to understand. Now, when I got rid of it completely, and I wasn't eating any kind of fried food, and I was on a low-fatty diet, all of a sudden, my cholesterol level dropped significantly lower. I was able to get off the medication.
Have you ever heard of some tall, thin, usually it's man, tall and thin, they had high cholesterol and they didn't know, and all of a sudden they had a stroke. And you're like, how in the world? How did he have high cholesterol? And, you know that tomorrow night we'll be talking about hypertension, the silent killer. Why is it the silent killer? Because most that have the stroke are undiagnosed. They don't know that they have hypertension. We had a lady, she was dizzy. She was, I think, in her 70s. And dizzy, she called her grandson, come over. He was one of those ambulance, medics. And he came over, and he was checking her, didn't know what was wrong. He checked her blood pressure. It was 210/100. That's why. And so they took her in, and that was the first time they had known. I mean, she was in her, I think it was 70s. And here, never before, but all of a sudden. So that is what, if I eat a high-fat meal twice a month, I will have elevated cholesterol.
He'll look fit. He'll look healthy.
Yeah.
But it's still going to elevate your cholesterol level.
Does that make sense? Do you have any questions on that? It makes sense.
And also, we need to be very, very careful with processed food. Now, we're finding out that raw diet is better. But how do we know what's good food and what's bad food? And this is the way I explain it to my patients. Anything that's made by God, it's good for you. It's not going to elevate your cholesterol level. It's going to lower them. But if it's man-made, it's going to probably elevate your cholesterol and it's not good for you. So I usually give an example. I say, who made potato? Well, God made potatoes. But who made potato chips? Man made potato chips, right? How about who made apples? Apples are good for you, right? But who made apple juice? Man made apple juice. So is apple juice good for you? Yeah, there's some good things, but too much of apple juice is not good for you either. But there's no such thing as too much of apples, because after you eat 2 or 3 apples max, you're gonna, probably stop. But in order to make a cup of apple juice, you need to juice at least 2 or 3 apples, right? And most people can drink 2 or 3 cups of apple juice. That means they're consuming about 9 apples at a sitting. Now, that's an impossibility normally, but you can do that when you process the food. Does that make sense? So all you have to do is look at the food and say, who made this? If God made it, it's good for you. You can eat as much as you want. Normally, you can't eat too much.
Unless it's what? Nuts.
Yeah, you have to be careful with that because the nuts contain a lot of fat. But most of the other food, if it's man-made, you need to try to stay away from them as much as possible. When you do that, you're going to find great healing.
Yeah, I knew someone that they indulged in the nuts. They were eating good, but they indulged in those nuts. At any time of the day, they would grab the nuts, and they had elevated cholesterol.
So too much of good thing is bad thing, right? And also, our society is saturated with, coffees and, tobaccos and liquor. Obviously, we all know that that's not good for us. But you also need to,
anything that is white, like white rice, white bread. You need to have a whole grain diet. Now, obviously, potatoes, white Irish potatoes, God made that, right? The fiber helps clean the cholesterol and, I don't know exactly. Doc knows more about that. But
fibers really will help you to cleanse out your gut, and while it's doing that, the fiber is a great absorber. It absorbs a lot of the bile, and it excretes it out. So it's a great way to get rid of the bile, which is in essence cholesterol, right? Because bile is made from cholesterol. So as you eat a lot of fiber, your cholesterol level is going to drop naturally.
Now, something interesting, eating butter, within just a few hours, your cholesterol will be elevated by 20%. So, now I'll give you a secret. Now, I'm not telling you this so that it gives you license to do this. Obviously, butter we shouldn't be having because it's a product from animal. But if you take garlic and put it with butter on bread, it does not rot. It does not raise. So what would that tell you about garlic? Garlic lowers it works against the butter.
Yes, and the other thing you need to remember about dairy, and I always tell my patients about dairy, anytime you mix dairy with sugar, it does a couple of things. It raises your sugar level tremendously, and then the other thing it does is it raises your cholesterol level. So, doctors did studies where they were giving animals just the milk, or I'm sorry, this was to humans. So they gave milk to people, and they checked the blood sugar level, and obviously the sugar level went up, and then it came down within 3 hours. They gave the sugar to the individual separately, same, sugar spiked up and came down. But when they combined the sugar and the milk together, what they found was that the sugar level was spiked for 9 hours, and then would come down. It's not additive; it's multiplication. It's not 3 hour plus 3 plus 3 is 6 hours. It's multiplying 3 times 3. And so what we find is that as people eat fatty meal, and then, pardon me, and as they eat the fatty meal, and they eat something like our favorite ice cream, right? What is ice cream? It's dairy mixed with sugar. That is the catalyst that'll initiate the heart attacks and the strokes. So it is very, very important that we need to stay away not only from the butter, but anything that's dairy mixed with sugar is deadly.
Cheese. Is cheese good for you? Cheese is a very concentrated what? Dairy. Very concentrated, and that is something that will increase your cholesterol very much so. So
as we turn off the faucet, these are some of the very, very important things that you must do if you want to affect your cholesterol. You must eliminate, the fresh food. You must eliminate any kind of fried food. You must, eliminate, processed food. And any of the tobaccos and, liquor and coffee, any of those things you need to try to you need to really eliminate. These are the big things that you must make changes. Otherwise, you're going to have very little impact on your cholesterol level.
So can you fry something without oil? Yes. Have you ever tried to saute onions without oil? I'll give you a little secret. If you take the onion and chop it up and put it in your frying pan, We use a titanium ceramic nonstick. It's sort of a specialized frying pan. It's not the Teflon. We'll just take a little bit of salt and sprinkle it on the onions, and it actually brings the water out of the onion, and you can saute it. You don't need to add water, you don't need to add oil, and it sautes over medium heat very nicely. And then, if you're making spaghetti sauce or something, then you saute your onions first, and then you add the rest of the stuff. So anything that can be fried usually can be baked. So we're also wanting to look at free oils, because free oils, that's very, much fat. So even like extra virgin olive oil, if you eat too much of that, what's going to happen? It's going to elevate your cholesterol levels.
And then the next thing you need to try to do is unplug the sink. And these are, some of the essential steps that you must also incorporate into your changes. For example, you need to increase the consumption of, fresh fruits. Now, they've done studies where they did slices of dried apples, about 2 apples a day, significantly lowered your cholesterol level. Obviously carrots also, when they were consuming about 3 carrots a day, that significantly lowered your cholesterol level. So these are food that you must increase. You can't just eliminate all the bad stuff and think that you're okay. Now you must incorporate more of the good nutritious foods, such as fruits and vegetables. Okay? And oh boy, beans. Beans are superfood. It's not just soybeans, but all types of beans. They have about equal. Actually, other beans have better property than soybeans in lowering cholesterol. So consuming pintos, kidneys, red beans, those are all excellent beans that we should try to consume on a daily basis.
The beans actually have something in it called L-arginine, and we'll talk about that tomorrow night when we deal with hypertension, but very good for the vessels, the blood vessels, and the arteries and veins.
And you know what? Oatmeals, oat brands are excellent in lowering your cholesterol as well. So you should be consuming oats as much as you can. But the wheat did not affect the cholesterol. So yes, you should be eating brown rice and the whole wheats and all of that. But oat was a little bit better in lowering your cholesterol. Okay? And we were talking about nuts. You should be eating about a handful of nuts. Whatever you can grab with your hands, like this, that's the right volume of nuts you should be eating per day.
A closed fist upside down. That's a good amount of natural fats. That's very natural. Obviously, if you took that amount and you squeezed out the oil, when you separate the oil from the nut, then it's a free oil. It acts differently in the body. So it's better to get it as what God made.
And most Americans are really dehydrated. So when your body is dehydrated, then you're putting extra burden in your system by everything being more concentrated. Therefore, it can't flow properly. So just the fact that you're drinking more than 8 cups of water per day, it's going to really, really help you to prevent any kind of, heart attacks or strokes. So everybody needs to be increasing their water intake. It's amazing to me how much water people drink. And I ask questions. I mean, usually the 16-ounce bottles of water, that's 2 cups in a bottle. And I ask them how many bottles do they drink per day. And most of the answer is maybe 1, maybe at best 2, and they think they're doing very well. Well, that's only 4 cups of water per day. That's totally inadequate. We need to be drinking very frequently and, much more larger volumes of water. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yes, when you wake up in the morning is the best time to drink a good 2 glasses at least. I drink about 32 ounces when I wake up. And warm water, not so hot that you can't, drink it. Warm water is very good in preparing for digestion. We'll deal with that later in the series. But water is something in the morning you can chug it. That's what you want to do. It helps rinse out all the different things that have been happening in your body through the night. But then through the rest of the day, you want to be sipping. Gulp, gulp. Because if you drink it and chug it too quickly, it actually floods again, and you aren't actually hydrated adequately. You only get partial hydration, and you'll be running to the restroom. So sipping a bottle of water over 30 minutes is much better than chugging it in the daytime. Now, of course, sometimes you're really thirsty and, I'm not saying you can't chug it, but it's better if you're planning, try to drink it slowly. It will hydrate your body.
And it's always best to drink water before the meal, about 30 minutes before the meal, and then about 2 hours after meal is the best time to drink water.
And would the water need to be cold, hot, warm during the day, room temperature? What do you think? Room temperature. Why is that?
Well, if you drink cold water, as the cold water hits your stomach, your whole stomach's going to shrivel up and shrink down a little bit, and then it's going to stop the absorption. It's going to interfere with digestion. So, and the reverse is also, opposite is also true. If you drink too much hot water, then the body has to cool or warm up the water to the body temperature for it to absorb. So therefore, it's much better to be drinking lukewarm water or room temperature water than drinking too cold or too hot. Mm-hmm. And it was a little getting used to. I was always drinking cold water, right? Most people drink cold water. That they feel that's better. But as soon as I started drinking more lukewarm water, and then later on would go back to drinking cold water, I really actually I can feel my stomach shrinking up and giving cramps as the stomachs are trying to handle the cold water. And so it's very, very important that as we're drinking water, that if you want to let the water absorb quickly, you want to drink the body temperature or room temperature water.
If you buy, let's say, a Ferrari, wouldn't you take and read the manual? You would want to read the manual and, what kind of oil do I need to put in? What kind of all these different things? So as our bodies are becoming healthy the way God intended them and getting rid of all the different illnesses or ailments we have, what would be happening is also when you put in something bad after your body's gotten better, your body will reject. So you'll notice as you get healthier, you will notice your body talking back to you.
That's right.
Like Sam's stomach told him it's too cold. So as you progress, you will notice, I used to be able to do that, but now if you go back to that, you will notice your body resisting that. So the sunlight. Getting adequate sunlight. When the sunlight hits your hand, your face, the back of the neck, that is where most of your vitamin D is made. When it goes through your skin, it converts the cholesterol into vitamin D. Vitamin D sounds like it's a vitamin, but it's actually
a hormone.
A hormone. And how many cells in the body have a receptor for vitamin D?
Every single one of them have a vitamin D receptor.
So how important would vitamin D be? Very important.
And in my experience, whenever I see somebody coming in with very weird problems in their life, I usually check their vitamin D level, and sure enough, their vitamin D level is really low. And unless I correct that first, usually I cannot correct the original problem. So it's amazing how vitamin D is essential. Now, I think we live in a, sun-phobic, nation, because everybody, every time they come in, they go, how much sunscreen do I need to put in? What's the PFC, level that, sunscreen they should be using? And I have to constantly remind them, about an hour of sunlight a day is very good for you. Try to get about an hour of sunlight where you don't need to use sunscreen or whatnot. But if if you're going to be out in the sun all day long, obviously, you're going to be at the beach all day long, obviously you do need to protect your skin. But I always imagine, there are fishermen out in the ocean who's constantly fishing, and they're dark and red all the time. They never use sunscreen, and yet they never get skin cancer. So what's the deal with that? And what they're finding is that it's not so much the sun that's the problem. It's the fact that you don't have any vitamin D, you're dehydrated, and then all of a sudden you go out and fry your skin, and essentially what you're doing is you're frying your cells on the skin. It's dehydrated, all the fatty lipids that's deposited in your skin, that just gets fried. What happens when we fry fat? It turns into carcinogens, cancer-causing chemicals. And so this is why when people go out and get a lot of sun and they get a sunburn, they're gonna be at risk for skin cancer. But if you're getting sun regularly and you're well hydrated and you're not eating fatty food, you're not eating animal flesh food, then the chance of getting skin cancer is very low, even though you're getting plenty of sunlight.
Another study they've looked at was one of the highest skin cancer places in the world was up in the Norwegian states. I mean, where they hardly get sun, but they had a very, very, very dairy-rich diet. Very rich in dairy. And so start thinking about that. Sort of lets you know it's not the sun that is causing it. It's the lifestyle, the diet.
And, these are something that that's going to help you, but it's not essential. But in order to kind of clean up your diet, these are some of the things that you can consider adding to your diet so that it'll help you to optimize your cholesterol level. So, for example, flaxseed. Man, flaxseed is a wonderful thing.
Yes, it actually helps give good flora to your digestive system. It's a natural cleanser, detoxifying. When you mix that with the pumpkin seeds, the pepitos, I think is in Spanish. When I go to the Spanish store, it says pepitos, but I don't speak Spanish. But those two together, they are very good for cleansing the body and for putting the correct flora in the digestive system.
And I've always had a hard time eating flaxseed because it's sort of kind of bitter. It's kind of hard. It's very hard to take it as a whole. But ever since you showed me how to mix it with banana, man, that works well. If you take one banana and about a tablespoon of grounded flaxseed, you mash it together, that is delicious.
Yes.
Yeah, my kids want to take more.
Yeah, we'll make our whole grain waffles, and we'll mash up a banana and put our 2 tablespoons ground in there, freshly ground. And there's a reason for freshly grinding it, because the flaxseed is something very interesting. It is totally sealed when it comes from God, right? In a seed. When you break that, immediately it starts oxidizing its nutrients. And after a few hours, it is greatly reduced. So you don't want to buy already ground flax seeds. You want to grind your flaxseed. We noticed that coffee was one thing you needed to give up, so use your coffee grinder. Clean it up. That works very well for grinding flaxseed. That's what we use. And grind it up, and then dump it in your banana. Mash it up, and if your banana, if it's not quite sweet enough for, you can add a little bit of natural sweetener, but you want to go easy on that. But I tried many different ways, and when we came up with the banana, man, we have no problem eating flaxseed.
Yeah, it works really well. Also, the lecithin granules, these are some of the fatty components of the soybean, and they make it into little granules, and they're excellent at liquefying your cholesterol and getting it out of your system.
Now, one thing with soy lecithin, you want to make sure you try to find an organic source or a non-GMO. Doesn't need to be organic, but at least non-GMO, because soy products are one thing. We won't go into the organic and the non-GMO things here, but try to find the source for non-GMO. It will make a difference. You can search on non-GMO, GMO, and find lots of things out on the internet. Garlic, as we mentioned before, when you put it on butter, it
neutralizes the negative effects.
Yes. But garlic it's not only talking about cholesterol lowering, but it's also hypertension. So,
I mean, there's many benefits to
mhm,
garlic, but personally, I do take a supplement called garlinase, and one pill, I believe, is like two,
four.
four
Yeah.
clove leaves of
Yeah.
garlic, and so the recommended dose was about one or two garlinase tablets before meal. And if you do that, you can significantly lower your cholesterol level as well.
Yeah, the lady that we had, she had many different issues, but her cholesterol was over 400, and by the 15th day, she had to stop taking not only the 4 tablets of Garlinase, but also her cholesterol lowering medication and her hypertension medication the 15th day. For some reason, the 2 weeks. And so we've seen it many times where it goes that long. If they've been keeping a consistent diet until then, it's 14 days out and then it drops. So now obviously if I had a fatty meal a week ago and then I'm initiating the lifestyle, it would be a week out for me. But so it varies some, but we always know by the 14th day we're looking to make sure that they're keeping track of their blood pressure and their glucose and different things, because it drops by the 15th day.
And there's also a thing called red yeast rice, and basically it's a rice with a mold on it. But this mold contains the statin drugs, and so when you consume that, obviously you're going to get almost like you're taking medication. So this is not something that I would take on a regular basis, but only if you have a really, really high elevated cholesterol level and you don't want to take the medication, you can consider this, but it's not something that I would do it on a regular basis.
And these are suggestions if you are dealing with high cholesterol and you're wanting to help it quickly. But just living the lifestyle that we will be sharing with you through this week, it will mop it up. It just takes a little longer. So these are things that will help speed up. I can't read that one.
This Google, it's a tree sap that's from India, and it seems to have a wonderful property in getting rid of your cholesterol as well. So you can take about 300 milligrams 3 times a day, and once your cholesterol level normalizes, then you can take 300 milligrams per day, and that would also greatly lower your cholesterol level.
Fenugreek, also, it's an herb. It lowers the total cholesterol and the LDL. One thing we didn't put on here was, I just had it, olives. It just came out 2-3 years ago that research showed that even though olives are fat, that they actually start deactivating the plaque off the arterial walls. It'll start popping them off. So about 7 olives. Now you want to get some good olives. We like to get the Lindsay Naturals. They are as natural as we can get. And you can get them at Walmart. And just taking those every meal will help start deactivating the plaque, along with all the other things, but it helps getting that off of the arterial walls. So, cholesterol levels can normalize within 4 to 12 weeks, depending on the severity of the plaque buildup. So, we've seen the cholesterol in 1 week. I mean, I've seen it where even shorter, we've seen it reverse that quickly. So it just depends on how much you're able to do or how severe issue you had with it. So, but through lifestyle and diet, now notice I'm saying lifestyle and diet. It's not just diet, because there is a lifestyle that has to coincide with it. There's no more high cholesterol that cannot be reversed. I've never seen it.
Yeah.
We've had thousands of cases, never seen it. So, any questions? Any questions on cholesterol? Maybe we told them enough information. Tomorrow, we will be covering hypertension, the silent killer. And it will be at 7 p.m. So come and join us. And cholesterol was the base, because a lot of things, once you take care of this, then you'll understand as we go forward through hypertension and diabetes and all the other things, it will make sense. We don't have to go back and teach you from this again. So, we hope to see you tomorrow, and without any further ado, have a good night.